Today we're going to be looking at sketch pictures and an efficient and accurate way to work with them. Looking in the Solidworks help file, we notice it says the resolution is limited to 4096 by 4096 pixels, with files that exceed that limit being cut in half until they meet the limit. Now, the help file does say this is only for TIFF files, and I'm uncertain if this has changed recently, but I know in the past, even working with other file formats, your image can be too big. In any event, it's much better to have only the information we need. So the first stage of working with a sketch picture is to crop your image. I do not recommend doing anything else other than cropping your image. Here's a good example of what the sort of thing we could be dealing with. If you want to find out the file size, one way to do it is to right click on it and then look at the details, and Windows should report the size, and we can see here that we're 1124 by 2014, which was within the 4096 limit. So our first stage is to prepare the image files and crop them to down just what we need, also making sure that it's within those limits. I don't recommend doing any other kind of manipulation like rotate and things like that. We'll do that inside Solidworks. Sometimes there will be some additional preparation work needed, but that is beyond the scope of this tutorial. When working with sketch pictures, I recommend adding them as the very first feature in a part file. At the moment it's not possible to add a sketch picture into an assembly. We have to work with part files, and as I say, it's much better to have them as the very first feature in your part. So we've created a brand new part and we're going to create a sketch. Then on the sketch commands you will have sketch picture. If the sketch picture button isn't available, you can right click, customize, go to commands, sketch, and then you can find the sketch picture image and drag it onto your ribbon. I already have it, so I don't need to do that. The other way is tools, sketch tools, and you will find sketch picture here. So I'm going to select my image. It takes a little bit of time for Solidworks to load it in. There you go. I'm just going to zoom out so we can see it. And you can see what it's done. It's inserted it, the bottom left corner at the origin. We also have, this is the scale tool, and we have a few other options available in the property page. For now, we're going to ignore that, so I'm just going to click OK out of it, and we have successfully inserted our sketch picture. After inserting your sketch picture, the first thing we should do is we should rotate the image. Now hopefully you have some kind of indication on your picture that you would like to either be horizontal or vertical. Now it isn't very clear on this, but if we zoom in, I have some pencil marks on my photograph, which is of a template. Here they go, we've got one here, and there's a very faint one down here, and those correspond to my vertical line. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a line, it doesn't matter what it is, and I'm going to zoom in. Oh, I'm not in a sketch, so now we can do this in a new sketch, or we can do this in the sketch picture itself. It doesn't really matter. So I'm going to edit the sketch, I'm going to zoom right in, and I'm going to put my line right in that pixel, and then I'm going to come out to the top line. We're going to zoom right in, and I'm going to, so now we have a line. I'm going to check my third position, and we can see it's slightly off here. So we have an option now, we can just maybe tinker with it a little bit. This is just down to the inaccuracy of either the photograph or the original marks. And this line is very faint. So we can look and we can examine and we can see how, that's pretty good. It's difficult, you know, that will kind of do. So Now we have a line that represents our vertical. The next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to fix those in position. So I'm going to select both ends and I'm going to apply the anchor, make fixed. Okay, so I'd actually like that line to be vertical. So my next stage is to draw a vertical line. There we go. So we have a vertical line. So now what we can do is we can measure that angle. There's a few ways to do it. One way to be, we could use a sketch dimension. And now we can see the value here. It would be really nice if we could copy that value, but look, SolidWorks doesn't even let us select it. So one thing you could do is you could just write it down, 93.0142605 degrees. That's one way. Maybe a method that may be a little bit more convenient will be to use the evaluate. If we use evaluate, we can measure and we can choose those two things, and then you see, look, we can copy. So we copy there. Okay, so now we have the value of how much we'd like to rotate this by. What we can do is we can double click the sketch picture itself. When you double click the sketch picture, what happens is it opens up the sketch picture property page, and now we can look down to the angle and we can paste in our value. So Control V, there's our 93.0142, and we'll do that and see what happens. There you go. So it's rotated it as we like. I'm going to click OK to come out, and what we could do is we could check that it worked by drawing another line. So I'm going to go onto my pencil mat that I had on my template, and we're going to pick up a vertical relation, and we're going to then drag it down and see, you notice I just moved it, so it might be worth to use your anchor to fix it, and then we can have a look. We're a little bit off, and we're a little bit off again there. It's not bad. As I say, you can mess around with this and you can get it just right. A lot of it will depend on the quality of the image you're working with. For me, I'm happy with that for now. So we've finished with the sketch elements. We can just delete them, and we have rotated our image. One little point to note is that when you apply a rotation, this is actually a transformation that happens all the time. So if I was to delete the rotation and put 0, it goes back to where we started. If I was to put in 45, it goes to 45. If I put 90, it goes to 90. So it isn't a cumulative effect. It always is the rotation from where we began. The other point to note is this is an anti-clockwise direction. So if you want to rotate it clockwise, you may have to do some maths. For example, if we want to rotate 90 degrees clockwise, what we could do is we could actually type in 360 minus 90, and you can see that the result is 270 degrees. So depending which way you want to go it, you may have to, and the reason I say that, obviously it's a trivial case with 90, but you know, 360 minus the value that we actually copied from the evaluate feature, that's a little bit harder to do in your head. Yeah. So anyway, I'm going to go back to where I was, and you can always go back is the takeaway. And also sometimes you will have to subtract your angle from 360 if you want to rotate clockwise. After we've rotated our image, the next thing we want to do is we want to scale it. So hopefully you have some nice clear positions on your image that you can then use to measure. What we're going to do is we're going to prepare that. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to edit the sketch. I'm going to go in and I have a measurement on this template from the top. So I'm going to kind of look where this line comes through and I'm going to guess it's about there. I'm just going to put a sketch point there. Then I'm going to zoom out and zoom into the bottom. Now, I find it very useful to use these fixed. You know, when Solidworks sketches, you know, they're very flexible and they'll move around by themselves. You can just temporarily fix them. Just makes working with them a little bit easier. I'm going to get a second point, and what I'd like that to be is I'd like it to be vertical. That may not be the case with what you're working on, but I know in this case my measurement is a vertical dimension. So from that point I'm going to then drag this point down and down to the bottom here, as we say, it's somewhere in here. Now we're looking at the individual pixels. I think that the resolution of this photograph is 72 dots per inch. So, you know, you can see for yourself how big one of these pixels is. Obviously, the higher resolution photography you can have, then we can be a lot more accurate. I'm just going to kind of guess that it's about there. So let's have a look back at the top, check I'm happy. Kind of looks fair enough. So now that we have two reference points, what we're going to do is we're going to use the scale tool. It's always worth preparing 2 points. These points could be a line if you wanted to. We could do a line. It doesn't have to be vertical. You know, we could have a measurement between this point and this point. The point to make is that what you need to get accurate, you need to zoom right in and pick exactly where it's going. You can see when I was a long way zoomed out, then I didn't get it very accurate. But if you're going for absolute accuracy, as accurate as you can be, it's always worth zooming in and preparing some sketch entities. The reason I say that is because the sketch tool will lock on to those. So I'm going to double click the picture, which is going to open up the sketch picture tool, and now we have the scale tool. Here it is. So I'm going to, and you can see why we've done it. As we approach the sketch point, we get the yellow and it's locked onto it. Now I can take the other end and we can lock onto the bottom, and as soon as we let go, it's going to ask me to enter a dimension. Now I know I need to be 1931 millimeters. Okay, Solidworks has now rescaled our image, and we just click tick and we're done. Okay, so we've just scaled our image. So the next thing to do is a little bit of tidy up. We're done with these points now, we don't need them, so we can delete them. The other thing to note is that if we double click the sketch picture, we open up the property page, and we can see that the X and Y coordinates of the bottom left have moved. Now, when we originally brought the picture in, that was at 0, 0, but we've applied a rotation, and then we've also applied a scale. So those two operations have actually moved the origin. So the next stage is to reset those back to 0. So we're just going to highlight the X and put 0, and highlight the Y and put 0. And that's good. It's just something you have to do before we move on to the next stage. And the next stage is positioning the sketch picture in relation to the origin. So I'm just going to click out of that, and it's the same process every time that we go through. We need to use sketch points or sketch lines or whatever we want to give ourselves somewhere. I'm going to guess about there. Okay, So now we have our point where we'd like the origin to be. Remember that before we do this, we have to check that the sketch picture is at 0 to begin with. Now once we have our origin at 0, we can measure it. So we're going to measure between the origin and we're going to measure to our point. And you can see that we have our delta x and delta y. So we can start off with x. I'm going to copy that. Now what I'm actually going to do here is I'm going to just open Notepad. Okay, and I'm going to paste in my x, and then I'm going to paste in my y. Okay, then I can close this command. I'm just going to move this off screen. So what we can do now is double click, and in our x, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the value we got for x and I'm going to paste it into x. Now if we do that, there you go. You can see that we're now, the origin is directly below that point. The second one is now we can paste in our y value into the y. Now that didn't do what we wanted to do. Look, it's moved it up. So what we need to do is put a negative sign behind, in front of it. And there you go. I'm just going to exit this and we're going to zoom in and we're going to see, yes, the origin is now precisely where I wanted it to be. So I'm going to delete the sketch point. We no longer need it and we're going to exit. Okay, we've successfully inserted, rotated, scaled and positioned our sketch picture. The last little thing we're going to do is we're just going to rename it. It's a good practice to always rename our sketches, and what I'm going to do, I know this is the inside template. After it's been renamed, what we're going to do now is we're going to freeze the sketch picture. So to do that, we're going to take the freeze bar and drag it down below. What that does is that locks the sketch picture and prevents us from making any changes. The reason why this is such an advantage is, let me just unfreeze the sketch picture. Now, if you were to inadvertently double click anywhere on this sketch picture, you notice not only does it open up the sketch picture, it also opens up the sketch picture dialog, and then, for example, you could move it. That could be disastrous. You've just spent quite a few minutes carefully preparing this just as you wanted, and then look what's happened. Just a couple of double clicks and you've just broken all that good work. So I'm going to cancel out of that, and look, even when you cancel out of it, the changes are still in effect. Yeah, we can undo it, but it's good chi to prevent against these little irritations. You know, you double click it, and if you're not careful, you can move it, and that could cause not just waste of time, but also an expensive mistake. So to avoid that, we're going to freeze the picture, and now double clicking has no effect whatsoever. Now that our sketch picture is inserted, rotated, scaled, positioned and frozen, we can start to work with it. And what we're going to do is we're going to analyze it. Now, lines are quite straightforward. We can do those, but a common task we have to do is make arcs, find radiuses, circles, whatever. So here's a quick tip for analysing. On the same plane as our sketch, we're going to create a new sketch, and I'm going to add a couple of points. So I'm going to zoom in. I'm just going to pick a point there, and we're going to pick a point, say, around about there. Now, 3 points define an arc, but I already have a point. I have the origin. I would like the origin to be at the very top of this. So using the origin and these additional 2 points. I'm going to exit that sketch and I'm just going to call this arc points. Okay, so now in a new sketch I can create a circle, and the idea of creating a new sketch is that while these sketch points can still move because they're undefined, if I make the circle coincident with it, my circle will move to the point, as you see, like that. You know, the point won't move to the circle. So I'm going to make it coincident with the first point and the second point. You can see this circle is still blue, it's still free to move, but 3 points is all you need. So we're going to select the origin and the circle, and when we make this coincident, we should find this sketch is fully defined and we'll have a black circle. There you go. So our sketch is fully defined, and if we zoom in, you can see we've got a reasonable approximation of that curve. Maybe it could change a little bit, but remember, it's the points that are defining it. So if you want to, what we can do is we can edit the arc point sketch and we can make tiny adjustments here, and we can play around with this until we're happy. So to just show you how that worked, we're going to do it again. I'm quite happy to use the same arc point sketch for doing the other side. I'm going to just have a look. We're going to have a visually look and check. You know, we might see that there's a little deviation or a lump or a bump, and the human eye is very good at seeing that. So from a far out position, let's choose a suitable location for our first point and one for our second point. If we weren't using the origin, then we would provide a third point, but we already have the origin. Now I can zoom in and I can really get that exactly where I want it to be. Maybe we can pull that out a little bit. So we have our arc points. Then this sketch, I'm going to rename, this can be our arcs. Okay, so I'm going to edit that. Now you might see that it might be difficult to spot these, so whenever you want you can just turn off the sketch picture. This is one of the great advantages of using multiple sketches, that you can turn them on and off independently. So we're going to find our origin, make that coincident. Then we're going to go coincident to our first sketch point and our second sketch point, and this should go black. We have a fully defined sketch. Now I'd like to just trim these away, so I'm just using the trim command. I'm just going to trim away what we don't need. Let's turn our sketch picture back on, and you can see. The other thing that's quite handy is you can choose colours. So for example, to make this more obvious, we can make it yellow, and we can zoom in and we can see how happy we are. Obviously, if you want to measure what those are as radiuses now, you can apply dimensions, and there you go, we have our dimensions. Lines are easier. Once you're finished here, you can create a sketch block, you can do whatever you like. The point is that we're going to create a sketch that is independent of the sketch picture. For example, once we're finished, we may even decide to delete that sketch picture, or we may have this sketch picture inside an assembly. Anyway, I think that's about right. We're about done. So to reiterate what we did, we cropped the image, we inserted the image, we rotated the image, we scaled the image, then we positioned it at the origin, we then froze the sketch picture, and then we were free to analyse the sketch picture. That's quite a lot to remember, so what we need some kind of, I don't know, hero. And here he is. Here's our guy, Cir Sofa. Cir Sofa. Crop, insert, rotate, scale, origin, freeze, analyze. Cir Sofa will save the day.